In the quiet suburbs of Willow Creek, a neighborhood known for its manicured lawns and unspoken rules, the evening sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the tree-lined streets. Marcus Hale, a tall, broad-shouldered black man in his mid-40s, stepped out of his sleek black SUV, his movements deliberate and unhurried. He had just returned from a long day, his mind still buzzing with the weight of classified briefings and high-stakes operations. But as he unlocked the door to his modest, two-story home, a sense of unease prickled at the back of his neck. He paused, scanning the surroundings, the familiar houses, the distant hum of a lawnmower, the faint scent of barbecue smoke wafting from a backyard nearby. Suddenly, the tranquility shattered. Two unmarked vehicles screeched to a halt at the curb, their tires grinding against the pavement. Out poured four men dressed in ill-fitting uniforms that mimicked police gear, badges glinting falsely under the streetlights. They moved with aggressive purpose, hands hovering near holsters that held what looked like tasers or worse. "Stop right there!" one of them barked internally in Marcus's imagination, though no words were spoken yet. Their postures screamed authority they didn't possess. These were the self-appointed HOA enforcers, a rogue group formed by disgruntled residents who patrolled the area under the guise of maintaining order, but really to enforce their biases. Marcus felt the familiar sting of scrutiny, the way eyes narrowed at him since he moved in 6 months ago. Whispers had circulated. Who was this black man living alone in a predominantly white enclave? What business did he have here? The lead enforcer, a burly man with a red face and a makeshift badge pinned crookedly to his chest, advanced quickly, signaling the others to flank Marcus. They believed he was an intruder, perhaps a squatter or worse, based on anonymous tips, laced with racial undertones. Little did they know, Marcus wasn't just any resident. He was Special Agent Marcus Hale, the FBI's most feared operative, a legend in counter-terrorism circles whose name alone sent shivers through criminal networks. As they closed in, Marcus's heart rate steadied, his training kicking in. He didn't flinch, didn't raise his hands in surrender. Instead, he observed their fake patches, the lack of official insignia, the nervous sweat beading on their brows. This wasn't a lawful arrest. It was a vigilante ambush rooted in prejudice. The air thickened with tension, the neighborhood holding its breath as the confrontation unfolded, promising a reversal that would expose the ugly underbelly of suburban racism. Willow Creek had always prided itself on being a safe haven, a gated community where families raised children in peace, away from the chaos of the city. But beneath the surface of polite smiles and community barbecues lurked a darker reality, a history of exclusionary practices that kept certain people out. The Homeowners Association, led by figures like Harold Jenkins, a retired accountant with a penchant for control, had long enforced rules that disproportionately targeted newcomers, especially those who didn't fit the mold. Jenkins and his cronies had formed an unofficial security team, donning surplus uniforms bought online and patrolling in personal vehicles equipped with flashing lights. They called themselves protectors, but their actions often crossed into harassment, particularly against minorities. Marcus Hale's arrival had stirred the pot. He purchased the house quietly, through a real estate agent who handled the details discreetly. To the neighbors, he was an enigma, a quiet man who kept to himself, drove a nondescript car during the day, and vanished for weeks at a time. Rumors spread like wildfire. He must be involved in something shady. Why else would a single black man choose this neighborhood? Anonymous complaints flooded the HOA inbox, reports of suspicious activity, like late-night arrivals or unfamiliar vehicles, parked nearby. These were fabrications, born from fear and prejudice, amplified by group chats where residents shared photos snapped from behind curtains. Unbeknownst to them, Marcus was no ordinary man. Recruited into the FBI straight out of the military, he had risen through the ranks with unparalleled skill. His specialty was infiltrating domestic extremist groups, dismantling networks that threatened national security. Nicknamed the Shadow in bureau circles, Marcus had a reputation for being relentless, his operations often involving deep undercover work that left him isolated. He chose Willow Creek for its anonymity, a place to decompress between assignments. But the constant surveillance from neighbors chipped away at that peace. He noticed the stairs, the slowed cars passing his house, the subtle ways they made him feel unwelcome. The fake HOA police were Jenkins' brainchild, an escalation from mere complaints. Emboldened by online forums praising vigilante justice, they armed themselves with pepper spray and zip ties, convinced they were upholding community standards. On this particular evening, a tip had come in. Marcus was allegedly trespassing in his own home, an absurd claim rooted in a neighbor's sighting of him entering through the back door after dark. Jenkins rallied his team, 3 other men, all white, all eager to prove their mettle. They piled into their cars, hearts pounding with self-righteous adrenaline, unaware they were stepping into a web far more dangerous than they imagined. As Marcus stood on his porch, key in hand, he sensed the approach. His FBI training had honed his instincts. He could read the situation like a briefing room map. These men weren't real cops. Their gear was mismatched, their formation amateurish. But the intent was clear: to intimidate, to assert dominance over someone they deemed out of place. The racism was palpable, woven into their assumptions, a reflection of broader societal ills where black men were seen as threats simply for existing. Marcus remained calm, his mind already calculating outcomes, knowing this encounter could unravel everything they thought they knew. The moments stretched as the fake enforcers encircled Marcus, their boots thudding softly on the driveway. The lead man, Harold Jenkins himself, puffed out his chest, his face flushed with a mix of excitement and nerves. He had spent years in Willow Creek, building his little empire of rules and regulations, but this was his boldest move yet. The other 3, Tom, a laid-off mechanic, Rick, a real estate broker with a grudge against outsiders, and Dave, a young hothead eager for action, fanned out, blocking any escape. They carried themselves with borrowed authority, their fake badges catching the fading light, but their eyes betrayed uncertainty. Marcus didn't move. He stood there, arms at his sides, his dark eyes scanning each man in turn. He noted the way. Tom's hand trembled slightly on his taser, how Rick shifted his weight uncomfortably, and Dave's aggressive stance that screamed overcompensation. This wasn't their first rodeo. Marcus had heard whispers of similar incidents in nearby neighborhoods. Minorities, hassled over trivialities like unmowed lawns or parked cars. But here, in Willow Creek, it had escalated. The HOA had grown bolder, fueled by national tensions around race and policing, where groups like this felt empowered to take law into their own hands. As Jenkins stepped closer, the air grew heavy, with unspoken accusations. Marcus could almost hear the narrative in their minds. A black man in a nice house must be up to no good. It was a story as old as America itself, echoed in countless real events, from Ahmaud Arbery's tragic jog to Breonna Taylor's home invasion. Inspired by such injustices, this confrontation felt eerily familiar, a microcosm of systemic bias playing out in suburbia. Marcus's pulse remained steady. Years of fieldwork had taught him patience. He knew rushing would escalate things, so he waited, letting them make the first real move. Jenkins reached for a pair of zip ties from his belt, gesturing for the others to close in. The group tightened their circle, the scent of cheap cologne and sweat mingling in the evening breeze. Neighbors peeked from windows, phones in hand, recording what they assumed was a legitimate takedown. One woman, Mrs. Ellis from across the street, had been the one to tip them off, her call laced with fear-mongering. "He's been coming and going at odd hours. Who knows what he's hiding?" Her words, though unspoken here, hung in the air like a fog. Marcus's mind flashed back to his own history. Born in a rough part of Chicago, he had faced prejudice from a young age, stopped by cops for walking home. From school, questioned in stores for simply browsing. Those experiences fueled his drive to join the FBI, to be the change from within. His career was marked by triumphs, busting a white supremacist ring in the South, thwarting a bombing plot in the Midwest. But each victory came with isolation, the need to blend in, to hide his true self. In Willow Creek, he thought he could finally exhale, but racism didn't respect badges or achievements. The enforcers lunged forward, Tom grabbing Marcus's left arm while Dave seized the right. They twisted his wrists behind his back, the zip ties biting into his skin. Marcus didn't resist. He knew the power of compliance in these moments, a tactic honed from training simulations. As they secured him, Jenkins rummaged through Marcus's pockets, pulling out his wallet and keys. The audacity shocked even Marcus slightly. These men were impersonating officers, a federal crime, yet they acted with impunity, convinced their neighborhood privilege protected them. Pushed toward one of the vehicles, Marcus felt the rough shove against his back. The door opened and they forced him inside, the interior smelling of fast food and entitlement. The car peeled away, leaving his house behind, the lights still on in the living room. The drive was short, to the community center where the HOA held meetings, a makeshift station for their operations. Along the way, the men exchanged glances, their confidence growing. They had done this before to lesser threats, immigrants, young people of color, but never someone like Marcus. Arriving at the center, they hauled him into a dimly lit room, zip ties still in place. Jenkins paced, his mind racing with questions. He didn't voice. "Who are you? What are you doing here?" The others stood guard, their postures rigid. Marcus sat calmly on a folding chair, his breathing even, observing the room, the stacks of HOA paperwork, the bulletin board with complaints, the faint hum of a fluorescent light. He knew this was illegal detention, but he bided his time, letting the tension build. Hours ticked by in silence. The men grew restless, checking their phones, whispering among themselves. Outside, night fell fully, stars piercing the sky. Marcus thought of his FBI colleagues, the secure line he could call if needed, but he chose to wait. This was an opportunity to expose the rot in Willow Creek, to turn their prejudice against them. As midnight approached, Jenkins finally decided to escalate, pulling out a phone to call reinforcements. Real police, he thought, to legitimize their actions. But as he dialed, Marcus's own phone, confiscated and on the table, buzzed with an incoming call. The screen lit up. FBI HQ. The men froze, eyes widening. Jenkins hesitated, then answered, his voice cracking slightly. The line connected to a stern voice on the other end, but since no dialogues occurred, the impact was in the reactions, the paling faces, the dropped jaws. It was a routine check-in from his handler, but to them, it was a harbinger. Panic set in. Tom fumbled with the zip ties, cutting them loose too hastily, drawing a thin line of blood on Marcus's wrist. Rick backed away, knocking over a chair. Dave paced, sweat pouring down his face. They realized their mistake too late. The man they had arrested wasn't a threat. He was the law incarnate. Marcus stood slowly, rubbing his wrists, his presence now commanding the room. The tables had turned, but the full reversal was yet to come. The night dragged on, the enforcers scrambling to cover their tracks. They offered water, chairs, anything to appease, but Marcus remained stoic, his mind mapping out the charges. False imprisonment, impersonation of officers, civil rights violations. Inspired by true cases like the Central Park Five, where innocence was ignored. Due to race, this incident highlighted how bias blinded people to truth. As dawn crept in, Marcus's calm demeanor cracked their facade further. Jenkins, the ringleader, slumped in a corner, his empire crumbling. Word spread through the neighborhood via texts and calls. Neighbors who had watched the initial confrontation, now questioned their own complicity. Mrs. Ellis, the tipster, stared at her phone, regret gnawing at her. The community center, once a hub of petty power, now felt like a trap. Marcus, free but watchful, began to piece together evidence in his mind, photos of their gear, records of past harassment. This wasn't just about him. It was about every person of color who had faced similar scrutiny. As the hours wore on, external pressures mounted. A real police car arrived, summoned not by Jenkins but by an anonymous tip, perhaps from a guilty neighbor. The officers, actual law enforcement, entered the room, their expressions shifting from routine to shock as they assessed the scene. Marcus identified himself subtly, flashing his badge from his wallet, which the enforcers had overlooked in their haste. The real cops took statements, their notebooks filling with details of the night's events. The fake enforcers were detained, their uniforms stripped away, revealing the civilians beneath. Handcuffs clicked, real ones this time, echoing the irony. Marcus watched impassively, his role shifting from victim to overseer. The rising tension peaked as federal involvement loomed. His call to HQ had triggered protocols. Agents were an aonitizing route, turning a local blunder into a national case. But the emotional layers deepened. Marcus reflected on the broader implications, the way racism eroded trust, how communities like Willow Creek fostered division. Real events, like the shooting of Botham Jean in his own apartment, mirrored this, where assumptions led to tragedy. Here, though, empowerment prevailed, but not without cost. The enforcers' families would suffer, the neighborhood's reputation tarnished. As agents arrived, the scene intensified. Searches uncovered incriminating evidence, emails planning patrols, videos of prior incidents targeting minorities. The EU net widened, pulling in more residents complicit in the bias. Marcus coordinated quietly, his feared reputation now evident. The rising action built to a crescendo of revelations, each layer peeling back the facade of suburban harmony to reveal the ugly truth beneath. The investigation expanded, with FBI teams combing through HOA records, uncovering patterns of discrimination, denied applications from black families, targeted fines. Jenkins' computer yielded forums where he rallied like-minded individuals, echoing real online hate groups. The emotional toll mounted. Tom broke down, realizing his actions stemmed from unexamined prejudice. Rick thought of his own family, how he'd taught them intolerance. Dave, the youngest, faced the harsh reality of consequences. Marcus, amid the chaos, felt a mix of vindication and sorrow. His work often dealt with extremists, but this domestic racism hit closer. Inspired by cases like the Greensboro Massacre, where hate groups operated unchecked, he saw parallels. The night turned into day, the community awakening to sirens and agents. Neighbors gathered outside, whispers turning to outrage, some at the enforcers, others at Marcus for overreacting. Tension simmered as media arrived, tipped off by leaks. Cameras flashed, reporters jostled, turning Willow Creek into a spectacle. Marcus avoided the spotlight, focusing on justice. The enforcers were processed, their fake authority exposed. Bonds formed in bias shattered, leaving isolation. The rising action, layered with emotional depth, kept the narrative pulsing, each revelation heightening stakes, drawing viewers deeper into the injustice and impending reckoning. Deeper probes revealed connections to broader networks, online groups promoting neighborhood defense with racial undertones. Marcus's team traced funds, vehicles, even weapons stockpiled. The scale grew, from local harassment to potential conspiracy. Emotional threads wove through. Marcus recalled his mother's warnings about fitting in, how she'd faced similar in her youth. This fueled his resolve, turning personal pain into professional drive. As arrests multiplied, the community fractured. Support groups emerged for victims, sharing stories of past incidents. Mrs. Ellis confessed her role, tears streaming in silent remorse. The HOA dissolved amid scandals, its board resigning. Marcus, the catalyst, remained enigmatic, his feared status amplified by whispers of his exploits. The buildup intensified with legal proceedings looming. Charges piled up: kidnapping, hate crimes. The enforcers faced ruin, jobs lost, reputations shredded. Yet glimmers of change appeared. Town, halls on bias, diversity initiatives. The story's tension, rooted in real racial struggles, built relentlessly, ensuring engagement through twists and human vulnerability. Expanding further, the FBI's involvement uncovered ties to extremist ideologies, echoing January 6 events. Marcus led interrogations silently, his presence alone extracting truths. Emotional arcs deepened. Jenkins confronted his bigotry, sparked by a family intervention. The neighborhood, once unified in exclusion, now divided, with allies emerging for Marcus. Hours turned to days, the case gaining national attention. Protests formed, not against police, but HOA abuses. Marcus's backstory leaked slightly. Military, hero turned agent, humanizing him. The rising action, rich with detail, sustained suspense, mirroring true stories like Ferguson unrest, where local bias ignited broader awareness. The community center transformed into a command post, FBI vans, lining the street under the harsh glow of floodlights. Marcus stood at the center, his posture unyielding as agents swarmed, laptops open, phones ringing silently with urgent updates. The fake enforcers sat in separate rooms, their earlier bravado evaporated, faces etched with dread. Jenkins, the architect of it all, slumped against a wall, his mind reeling from the magnitude of his fall. The air crackled with finality. This was the peak, where assumptions collided with reality. Marcus's handler arrived, a seasoned agent whose mere presence commanded respect. Together, they reviewed evidence, confiscated phones revealing texts, laced with racial slurs, plans to clean up the neighborhood. The twist deepened. These weren't just amateurs, their actions bordered on organized hate, inspired by real vigilante groups that had plagued communities nationwide. Marcus, the most feared for his unerring pursuit of such threats, now turned his gaze inward. In a swift operation, agents raided homes, uncovering more, printed manifestos, fake IDs, even unregistered firearms. The enforcers' network unraveled, accomplices named in panic. Tom cracked first, his body shaking as he pointed fingers. Rick followed, bargaining mentally for leniency. Dave, defiant at first, wilted under the weight of proof. Jenkins, cornered, faced the mirror of his prejudice, the racism that had driven him to this brink. Marcus orchestrated the arrests with precision, his feared reputation manifesting in every move. Flashbacks to his past operations flooded his mind. Raiding compounds, facing down armed militants, all paling against this personal betrayal. The climax built as real charges were filed, handcuffs snapping shut, mirroring the zip ties they'd used on him. The irony was poetic, the reversal complete. Media frenzy peaked outside, reporters clamoring for details. Leaks painted Marcus as a hero, the black agent who exposed suburban rot. Neighbors watched in shock, their complicity laid bare. Mrs. Ellis approached an agent, confessing her tip, her face ashen with shame. The emotional pinnacle hit as families arrived, witnessing the downfall, wives in tears, children confused. In the heart of it, Marcus confronted Jenkins in a silent stare-down, eyes locking across the room. No words needed. The message was clear. Your bias ends here. The agent's aura, honed from years of high-stakes pursuits, broke the man. Jenkins averted his gaze, defeated. The climax resolved in a flurry of activity, vans departing with suspects, agents wrapping up, leaving Willow Creek forever changed. With the arrests complete, Willow Creek awoke to a new dawn, the streets quiet but heavy with reflection. Marcus returned home, the lights still on as he'd left them, a symbol of interrupted normalcy. He bandaged his wrist, the miner cut a reminder of the night's ordeal, then sat in his living room, the weight of events settling. The FBI's involvement ensured swift justice. Charges stuck, trials loomed. Jenkins and his crew faced federal time, their fake empire dismantled. The neighborhood reeled. HOA meetings turned into forums for accountability, residents admitting biases, pledging change. Diversity committees formed, inspired by Marcus's story. Real estate listings emphasized inclusivity, drawing new families of color. Mrs. Ellis, racked with guilt, reached out anonymously, donating to anti-racism causes. The impact rippled. Media coverage sparked national dialogues on suburban racism, echoing cases like the McCloskey incident in St. Louis. Marcus resumed his work, but with renewed purpose. His feared status grew, a beacon for underrepresented agents. He mentored recruits, sharing lessons from Willow Creek. Emotionally, he healed through quiet reflection, honoring those lost to similar injustices. The resolution brought closure, but the takeaway lingered. In a world quick to judge based on skin, true power lies in resilience and truth.